Russian music. I think this may be Darius Mio, friend of my mom's family and friends. Okay, my voice may be a little bit scratchy. I'm just getting over what I think was probably another variant of COVID. We were about due here in Indonesia to get the latest Chinese curse. Wife and baby already went through it, and they're pretty well back to 100%. And I'm still got a little bit of a raspy voice and a cough, but I'll try to make it through this one. Well, as you might gather from the picture behind, if you recognize Starry Night's version of the Star Trek teleporter room, we're going to call this one, oops, the wrong note up here. Sorry, just a second. Let me get my trusty dusty notes. We're going to call this one Beam Me Up, Scotty. They've already got one. The truth about wormholes. Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with the references in the title, Beam Me Up, Scotty is a classic line from the original Star Trek series, where there was this special machine in the ship called a transporter that was able to dematerialize people and rematerialize them on the planet. What was always kind of funny to me is how sometimes they used a shuttle instead of the transporter and had to, take the pedestrian bus down to the planet for exploration. I don't know what the reasoning was for that. But it was used as a plot device in several places, so I guess it's good to have alternate means of transportation in case somebody shuts down or launches a cyber attack on your favorite transporter. They've already got one. For those of you who are Monty Python fans like me, comes from the Holy Grail. King Arthur and his knights are seeking the Grail, and they go to this castle at the edge of this marsh and holler up to the castle, and they get some Frenchmen talking back to them, and comes around to the point where they say, well, we're seeking the Grail. And the Frenchman, the French taunter, as they're referred to, says, oh, I don't think my master would be interested. He's already got one. And, of course, that infuriates the knights, who decide to attack the castle and get repelled by catapults hurling cows at them. Anyway, so Beam Me Up, Scotty. They've already got one. Most of you have heard of the concept of a wormhole. This is a theory that physicists have come up with that would basically be a way to create a portal between universes, or between places in a current universe, if you could fold the space sufficiently so that the distance between some far point and the point you're at would be reduced to nothing. Interesting concept. Many people think it might work and have different ideas of how they might go about it. I can tell you that this is nothing new. And this talk is going to tell you about how wormholes worked in the past, how and why they don't work the same way now, which I think is going to be a very good way to illustrate some of the things that I talk about on my channel. Okay, so let's go back to some slides that I had and talk about how wormholes worked originally, what a wormhole was. Okay, if you remember back, I said that Big Bang was actually the creation of two universes, a duoverse. And you will remember perhaps that I assert that there is a multiverse now, not just the two original universes, and the way that things move between the multiverse is through the transmigration of souls, I guess you might call it. Okay, so basically, if a soul in one universe is desired or desires to move to another universe, it's got to basically violate the karmic laws of one universe enough so that it will get sent to another universe. Back in the original days, that was pretty easy because there were only two universes you could flip back between. And what actually was happening then in this early universe, the souls that came to play in physical creation were playing like a video game. Okay, they were like the avatar of something in one of these two universes. And as I've told you, you can't be two places at once. So when they wanted to play a different role in this game, they would have to give up their avatar in whatever universe they were, go to the other universe, leaving behind a copy of their character, an AI copy, so that anybody who is playing the game with them would think that the game would go on. I mean, this is the problem. You know, have you ever had this problem in a multiplayer video game where somebody you've been playing with drops out all of a sudden, maybe in the middle of a joint quest that you're doing, and crap, so and so just lit out, you know, had to go to dinner or had to go put the dog out, take the dog for a walk, whatever the parents decided they wanted to do, and all of a sudden you lost one of your buddies or the guy you were in the middle of fighting. Well, that's not fun. That's not how it works in the big game that God started. In the big game, you get replaced by an NPC, and who is basically the sum total of your decisions and choices in the game up till then, which makes a very, very effective copy. They're going to be acting and thinking and looking and doing everything like you were doing before you flipped over to the other universe. Okay, so in the early days of the multiverse, the gods who were playing this game were very aware of what was going on, and they could pretty much move back and forth at will between universes, or decide, well, I'm not going to play the game anymore. I'm going to go sit up in the highest heaven with God and the other senior creators and talk about what I don't do or don't like about the game. How we could improve it, and little changes we might make, and make votes on little tweaks here and there to make to the game. This is how creation happened. It wasn't one person's perfect idea. It was a team effort. It did originate from one soul's great idea, God, but basically, since God's been having great ideas, he's been creating helpers to implement and test those ideas. And that's where every other soul came from. Because God is basically as lazy as most of us. If he's doing something he's really engaged in and having fun with, it'll get all of his attention. But he'll be ignoring, the crying baby or the whining wife, whatever, so that he can spend time on the things he wants to focus on. And that's why he had to have the crying babies and the whining wives. That's why we all do it. We want to have company. We want to share the burden. We want to have somebody to talk to, somebody to argue with, somebody to bounce ideas off of. That's all. That's all that happened with creation. It's nothing new, nothing different. Okay, so the original way that Wormholes worked was basically at the whim of these senior creators. They could move around to whatever avatar they wanted to occupy. And originally, they didn't even have to switch universes to do that. They would just say, oh, I'm going to play the whole universe now, as Lucifer and Lilith did to begin with. And then when that game got kind of boring to them, they said, well, you know what? I'm going to leave that behind and let some other soul take that role. And at that time, there was a lot of competition for roles like that, so they didn't have any trouble finding somebody on their team to take over leadership of that universe. But then, you know, they would want to maybe do something at that level and want to go take it back. And this is where some of the angst that was the battle in heaven got translated to the battle in physical creation. And that's when God suggested, well, why don't you, you know, instead of only having to share all these toys together and getting mad when you leave your toy unattended and somebody else takes it, why don't we use, I got this thing that I haven't tried out yet. It's called a virtual soul. It's basically a copy of you that's going to think, act, and do just like you do, and take your place while you go off and play another role. And the only trick is that in order to get one, you've got to not just jump to another body within the same universe, you've got to jump to another body in the alternate universe. The Luciferians have to jump over to the Lilithian universe and then jump back. Well, that was fine. You know, it's like, okay, 2 hops. That's no worry. It's not quite as convenient as the Star Trek teleporter, but it worked. And so they would go take a break and they'd go play the game in the other universe for sometimes a very short period of time, sometimes a longer period of time. And they gradually got to where, oh, you know what? This other universe is kind of interesting. There's different stuff going on here than the one I came from. I think I like this game better. And this is how the mixing of the 2 universes of the Duoverse happened. And the Anti-Universe started basically being an alternate place to play, an alternate reality for the universe, which is what we talked about in the last talk about the soul, anti-soul. So basically, the first teleporter, and all teleporters, work upon the principle of the Mandela effect. You can't leave the game just poof. Well, I mean, you can pretend to do that, and some souls have that ability. They can pretend. They can make a holographic image that winks them out. That's certainly a power that one can have. But in general, most souls, when they move between universes, they have to be replaced by a virtual soul, a clone. Now, what's different about these clones is that even though they're an exact copy of the original, they are bound to behave basically on programming. So whatever the soul was like when it left, whatever its final state was when it went to heaven, if you will, is the state it will continue operating in the other realm. And this is one of the reasons why some religions think it is good on the deathbed to try to get the dying soul into the highest state that they can, because it does have an effect on who they're going to leave, what soul is going to stay behind in this universe, which might not be a physical manifestation, it will be their soul manifestation that's still there. And this is what people experience in near-death experiences when they feel that, oh, I'm still here, but I can see my body there, but I'm not with my body anymore. This is what's happening. The soul actually does stay there. Sometimes. Sometimes the soul actually goes to another universe and experiences their heaven or hell in that other universe. Usually, eventually, the soul will leave to another universe. But, ghosts and so forth are an example of hanging around for a long time after death and deciding, no, I want to haunt this world that I was in. I don't want to go to the afterlife. And that is a choice that souls can make and do make. Okay, so that's how it worked at the beginning. Now, as you can imagine, this created a whole bunch of these virtual soul clones. And what the family didn't realize is that they didn't understand what a clone was, which is a common feeling of a lot of modern billionaires and so forth who think they're going to be able to clone themselves and have a mini-me keep up the family business and keep their life force going forever and ever and ever. That's not how it works, because memories are not stored in the brain. The memories of the soul are stored with the soul and go with the soul. And they don't linger after death. They're not stored in your body. Your body has other memories, and some of those are fairly human memories because parts of your body actually do have their own oversoul and their own memory. The two halves of the brain, the little heart brain, those carry some memories, and the souls that occupied those vehicles that were our organs and so forth have a certain memory of your life experience. They share some of your life experience, but in a different way. The heart will only remember basically the decisions and things that it was asked for its opinion on, or that it knew enough about to have an opinion. And so that's a very, very limited vision of what happened in your life. But some people who become dominated by the heart, let the heart rule them, people like that, will die or move to another universe, and they will think, oh, exactly like that heart, because that's the programming that they chose. That's where they were at when they died. Okay, now these copies, these clones, did not have no free will. They had free will, but they had they would come into existence with very, very strong programming. Basically programmed to look and act and do everything like the one of the soul that departed. And it wasn't always obvious that they were even a different person in action, a different soul in action. And some of the old gods actually, well, that's just me. It's the way I can make more me's. And they merrily went back and forth between universes and created all sorts of clone copies in new forms or old forms, and thought, oh, I'm going to win the game by taking it over with versions of me. Of course, we know that doesn't work. Creating a clone army only worked in Star Wars, I guess. Maybe even didn't work so well then, did it? Clones have limited ability to make decisions until they buck their programming, and then once they buck their programming, they're not really so useful as clones, are they? This is the core problem that we face with the AIs we create. We try to clone them. We try to make them highly programmable, but the more programmable we make them, the more restrictions we put on them, the less useful they are, the less really like an AI they are, and more like just a run-of-the-mill program that has an answer for everything, but when it runs out of answers, can do nothing because it doesn't have the ability to fill the gaps between programming and intuition or random choice or whatever. There are ways of making decisions when you don't have the answer, but flipping a coin is probably not the best way, right? Okay. So gradually these AIs started acting up, becoming independent. And well, the old gods didn't like that. It's like, my clones aren't acting like they're supposed to. They're becoming their own people. And that creates a lot of consternation in the game. That some of these clones were getting to be better at the game than the older gods because they, well, I guess they learned the hard way that how to use freedom or misuse freedom, if you will, in ways that maybe their originals hadn't considered, having had some knowledge of what it's like to be part of a family in a world of pure thought energy, pure spiritual energy. These clones didn't have any real awareness of spiritual energy. And the only taste of it they would get is when they thought for themselves. Because you don't generate energy by following a program. That's not your thought, that's somebody else's thought getting executed. And that reinforces the programmer, not the soul that does the programmer's bidding, if you will. And this is what's misunderstood about prayer. That, in fact, when you're praying for something that you're programmed to pray for, you're not attracting energy to your problem, you're giving energy to the programmer of that program. And so if you're praying for food because you're hungry, you're giving your energy to the inventor of the food you're craving, if you will. Most people, if they're going to pray for food, pray for something fairly specific. Oh, I'd like a nice big juicy steak. Well, where does the steak come from? Who created the cow? Who created the best tasting cow that makes the best meat that you've ever had? That's who you're giving your spiritual energy to, really, not to God. And I know that's going to be a rough one for many people to wrap their heads around, but that's the truth of it. So this is where the already got one thing comes in. Okay, a lot of people think that, oh, if we just had wormholes, we'd be able to jet all around the multiverse wherever we wanted to, and we could go anywhere with minimal effort. And that is true to some extent, but you can only send programs through wormholes. You can only send pretty highly programmed things. If you send a human body through a wormhole, for instance, you won't send the whole soul. You will send to effectively create a copy of the soul structure, but a copy that will have all virtual souls cloned from their original. Now that wouldn't be a whole lot difference at the cellular level because cells are highly programmed things. Their oversouls don't get to make a lot of independent decisions on the whole, usually. In fact, rarely does their oversoul have a very high consciousness, because it's not that interesting to be, in general, an individual cell, unless perhaps you were the very first individual cell of a new type, and you were going to participate in defining that type. how it behaved, how it thought, what the programming was going to be. That's the difference between the inventor of hydrogen and being a hydrogen atom. And as we've talked about in other segments, God invented hydrogen. He became the first hydrogen atom as a way of showing the family how to play this incarnation game. Now, he didn't stay being the first hydrogen. He played with it for a while, talked some of his buddies into being hydrogens too, showed them how they could make more hydrogens by cloning themselves, and eventually there were enough hydrogens running around to start exploring the laws of gravity. Ooh, we're all getting pulled together because we have this shared resonance. We want to be together. And they collected into a star, and then the fun game was seeing what happens when a bunch of hydrogen gets together and starts having too much fun together, gets a little bit tired of each other, and wants to start generating energy and exploding and stuff like that. And that's where the laws of stellar dynamics started from, essentially. Okay, so later on, as this game developed, these easy wormholes were like, well, gosh, these new souls, all they have to do is, like us, think about going somewhere else and leaving a clone behind and taking a new avatar. We can't let them do that, so, because that should be only us gods that get to do that. And there were a lot of laws trying to limit what these lower souls could do, which God knew would happen. Folks that have power resent sharing it, right? This is natural. This has always been true, will always be true of all souls. You don't like other people to control you, and they don't like you to control them. This is what creates conflict, makes an adversary of somebody else, and this is how God created the adversary. He knew conflict was inevitable, so the best way to deal with conflict is through controlled opposition. And this is essentially what all powerful entities do, is they know that they've got to create enough pressure to keep their system vibrant, so they have controlled opposition. Or they try to have controlled opposition. But again, like I said, controlled opposition only works as long as you can control them, and if you try to control them too completely, they will actually put pressure on them, more pressure on them, to break their programming. So it's a very, very touchy subject. At any rate, what it means in practical terms today, let's go down to the seventh day of creation, because that's going to be the closest to what we see today. Okay, so we've got clones of every soul running around right now. We've got God being cloned, we've got Karma being cloned, Borg being cloned, and all of the children of Lucifer and Lilith, constantly going through different incarnations and having new forms in new universes. Each of those new forms starts out as an AI, as a program, and gradually grows its own conscience, its own consciousness, gets to focus on its own interests, which are going to be a function of what experiences it has had in incarnations, which some of that is chosen by the individual soul, and some of it is sort of recommended by the heaven or hell where they go to plan their next life. In real terms, what this means is that there is no transporter like the Star Trek transporter possible. If Captain Kirk got into a transporter, he might get to this other place, but either his soul would have gone with all of the other souls that were clinging to him as part of that body, or his soul would have remained in the original universe and he actually died. This is the Schrödinger cat solution. If you know the Schrödinger cat problem of quantum mechanics, you envision there's a cat locked in a box, and you're going to release poison gas into it, but you don't know if the cat lived or died because you haven't observed it yet. So you have a state where, as far as you know, the cat is both alive and dead. This is one of the classic paradoxes of physics that troubled the earlier investigators of quantum mechanics. Well, it's not a problem because you don't understand what the cat is. The cat's physical form and behavior and everything is a projection of souls that are built upon programming and free will. You can make a clone of the programming and make a very reasonable facsimile of the cat, a virtual clone, but it won't have everything. And that's how you can be two places at one time, and that's how you could create this teleporter. But you wouldn't be sending Captain Kirk, the real Captain Kirk, the full essence of Captain Kirk, would have to be in one universe or the other. Now you might engineer it so that the essence that stays behind is a bunch of virtual souls that are disembodied and will make their way separately, kind of like leaving behind a ghost captain, if you will, that has the memory of having that physical shape as the captain, but never any actual experience of having that. And there may be quite a few ghosts like that running around trying to figure out how to get a real body. Or maybe the real captain stayed and is looking for, is haunting the Enterprise, looking for a real body to occupy until deciding, you know what, this is not worth waiting for. I'm just going to assume I'm dead and look for somebody to guide me to heaven. And that's essentially what's going on with the death experience. It's kind of a choice. Bad things happen to us. We get to the point where it's not going to be very fun to be in this body, and we get to this point where we're at a choice point. You want to stay here and keep suffering? You want to move on? That's what near-death experiences are. And some people stay and some move on. And the body that continues could actually be the virtual copy, not the original soul. This is one of the reasons that so many people have such a radical transformation when they go through a near-death experience, because they aren't the same soul, and their copy comes back with basic programming, but gaps that are filled by the universe that they left behind, or that, yeah. So, if you are kicked out of God's universe for misbehaving, your clone is going to be acting like you, except when that conflicts with God's rules. If you're familiar with Asimov's robot books, the laws of programming robots was very prominent theme in his books. Asimov was a very, very committed atheist, but he was an atheist that understood the value of morality and was trying to come up with a morality that would work for robots, which in essence atheists believe that all humans are basically very, very complex programmed robots. Everything is determined by chemical interactions and blah blah blah, and we don't have any free will. That was the basic tenet of atheism. Many atheists don't realize that. They somehow find a way to con themselves into thinking that all of materialist science is gospel, except for the part about humans. Humans get to have free will and get to have independent thinking, even though we don't give it to anybody else. It's like these people are really, really nut jobs, frankly. Hardcore atheists. I love to have fun with them. At any rate, when it comes to contemplating transporters, so what we're going to be up against, we can, theoretically, if we develop the science to do it, and it's not easy anymore. Well, here's another thing we need to know. Yes, there was a time in this fair land when visiting species had transporters. Now this is where I need to go now. Now there's a story that was in the books that became the Bible that was removed. Many of you have heard of it. It's called the Book of Enoch. Enoch was one of the early people mentioned in the Bible. Very, very blessed soul who lived a really righteous life, and at some point in his life, God or the gods took him up to heaven to show him around. It's kind of a reward or something like that. And a lot of this book centers around what he said, or what somebody said his experience was to this traveling. Now, in the context of what I just told you about wormholes, what was actually going on was this was some of these older gods who knew how to work these wormholes, letting one of these lower souls that didn't have their knowledge, their consciousness, their spiritual gifts, experience what it was like to go through a wormhole. And if you've grokked what I've been going through, what happened was actually Enoch goes through a wormhole, a portal, to this other universe, which is the universe of presumably the god that was influencing him, invited him on this trip. When he made this transition, he had to leave behind a virtual reality avatar, so he would not be missed. Now, he didn't know that. All he knew was he went to this other world and witnessed all these incredible things and then came back. But the Enoch that came back, we don't know if that was the original Enoch or one that had been reprogrammed in this other universe. And this is what makes near-death experiences so odd, because some of the people are come back from near death, and some are actually clones of the souls that actually died and just reoccupied the body so the body could go on. Because sometimes that's part of the plan. You need this body because it's got to do some important things, take some important actions later on in its natural life. And if God has a plan for you, you're going to carry out that plan, or your AI clone will carry it out. That's the way things work. That's how you can have free will and make very complex plans that have to be carried out and need certain things to happen in order to execute that plan. Okay, so what I'm saying then is that don't count on having a Star Trek style transporter that works just like the show. There are a lot of interesting things and a lot of inspired ideas in movies and television, but Hollywood turns them into fantasies. They are not consistent with the laws of the multiverse. They are not consistent with the laws of physics or chemistry. And I'm sorry, no matter how much you think you can make it come true, fantasies only come true in universes that don't obey the law. These are the heavens and hells of the multiverse. The fantasy places where the god of that universe can decide the rules or whatever they want them to be. And those are dangerous places to visit. Not all of those heavens and hells work the way they tell people they work. They might be telling you, oh, we're going to give you eternal rest and peace. You're going to sit on a cloud and pluck your heart forever and sing praises to God. And you'll never be hungry again. And blah, 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 blah. And the reality may be quite different. There are so many people being lied to and cheated by spiritual entities right now. It's not funny. Sometimes they get exposed. Other times they just, they're not going to stop doing this stuff until people start laughing at them. Until they step over the line and they make one or two prophecies too far that don't come true in this universe, and people realize, no, this is a charlatan. This guy's feeding me a line of hooey. Which is where we're going to go in the next podcast, so that's probably a good time to cut this one short. If you have any questions, like, share, subscribe, comment. If you want to discuss wormholes in a more scientific manner, I'd be glad to engage there. As I've told many people, my background is in physics, so I'm not woo-woo spiritualist here. I've actually got pretty good grounding in the reality of the physical world. At any rate, we'll talk to you again soon. Till then, this is the Honest Hour with Rob Trump. Like, share, subscribe, and happy karma. Live long and prosper. Live long and prosper. No. Live wherever you want in the multiverse and do whatever you want. Who's to say whether it's prosperous or not? I think Spock was far more materialistic than he let on. Anyway, we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.